South Africa's government has called the ICJ ruling a decisive victory for international law. In a statement, officials said it welcomed the judgment. It further said that the country would continue to act within global institutions to protect the rights of the Palestinians.
We expect Israel, as a self-proclaimed democracy and a state that respects the rule of law, to abide by the measures handed down by the International Court of Justice. After more than half a century of occupation, dispossession, oppression, and apartheid, the Palestinian people's cries for justice have been heeded by an eminent organ of the United Nations. Today, Israel stands before the international community, its crimes against the Palestinians laid bare.
Well, let's get more now from Professor David Monda from the Political Science Department, City University of New York. He's joining us live via Zoom from New York. Professor Monda, thank you for joining us on the program. In short, what do these orders mean in the context of the ongoing conflict in Gaza? And what do you expect to be the immediate impact of these orders, if any?
I think they mean different things for the different parties. For the Palestinians, it's a moral victory within the Court of International Opinion that Israel has been asked to safeguard the lives of Palestinians, that Palestinian lives matter, and that Palestinians are also covered under international conventions on genocide. But the Israeli spin on this would be that the court did not call for a ceasefire or for a stopping of the military operation within Gaza. So it's going to be a very tenuous situation because, as your earlier report has mentioned, we have Israeli hostages that are still being held in Gaza. We have Israel, which continues its military operations in Gaza and is actually creating a buffer zone, which will create even more tension from Palestinian land. But let's also not forget that this conflict in Gaza is also escalating to the international shipping lanes with the Houthis in Yemen and the Persian Gulf and the Suez Canal. So it's interesting to see how things will develop going forward.
Indeed, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already said again today that Israel has a right to defend itself. There was also an order asking Hamas to immediately and unconditionally release the hostages being held in Gaza. Do you see either of the combatants blinking first in effecting these orders?
I don't think either of the combatants will blink first, at least within the public face of international diplomacy, meaning within the face of the international community. On the Israeli side, let's not forget Benjamin Netanyahu runs a very weak right-wing coalition. So any measures that seem to be placating the Hamas or the Palestinians will lead to a collapse of his government. So Netanyahu is also in a very difficult position. But also in terms of Hamas, this continuing escalation of the war is also problematic because Hamas is not a state actor. It's a non-state actor, and Hamas has not complied by international law in terms of how it conducts its terrorist activities within the Middle East. So I think both sides are really in a very tenuous situation. And I think this is where the role of other major players like the United States and the Qataris, using their backdoor diplomatic channels, will be able to bring some kind of semblance of peace between or negotiation between these two parties. But I think within the public face, it's very difficult to see these very polarized groups, Netanyahu or Hamas, coming together to try and get a negotiated solution outside of, say, the Qataris or Americans doing backdoor diplomacy.
So let's look at Israel's allies here outside of Israel and Gaza. How do you see these orders impacting the way Israel's allies behave as the war continues in Gaza?
I think Israel's ally is principally the United States, which is the main benefactor militarily, economically that supports, and diplomatically that supports Israel. Will continue to put more pressure on Israel to really see that the humanitarian toll of this war against Hamas is not really disproportionately killing civilians. As we know, many hundreds of thousands of civilians, disproportionate number of civilians have been killed. So I think there'll be that element of pressure on the Israelis. But I think also on the side of Hamas, you know, a lot of the Arab countries, the Iranians, the Qataris will also be keen to see that this war does not escalate, because it can escalate to Yemen, it can escalate and disrupt Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and peace within the broader Middle Eastern region. So I think major players on both sides really have to find backdoor diplomatic channels to try and de-escalate this situation. But as it stands right now, ideologically, both Israel is very right-wing, Hamas is also very ideologically anti-Israel, and it's very difficult to see how both these groups will find a middle ground.
All right, Professor David Monda joining us there from New York. Thank you.